You probably didn't grow up hearing conversations about investing. Nobody sat you down and explained compound interest, retirement accounts, or how wealthy people think about money. What you heard instead were smaller things. The sound of bills arriving. The phrase, "We can't afford that." The silence after someone mentioned money. Maybe you learned early that money disappeared fast and stress stayed longer than it should. Maybe you watched adults work hard and still seem exhausted all the time. Maybe every financial problem felt big enough to shake the entire house. And if you grew up like that, something happens quietly. You don't just inherit financial circumstances, you inherit financial psychology. Fear, scarcity, caution, guilt. You learn that money is something to survive, not something to build. And for years, you carry that invisible ceiling with you, even after you start making your own money. Because the hardest part about changing your financial future usually isn't math, it's identity. It's becoming the person who learns how to build stability when nobody around you ever taught you how. And the moment you start thinking differently about money, you notice how many people never do. You realize most families don't pass down financial education. They pass down financial habits. Some useful, some damaging, some built entirely around survival. Then one day, maybe late at night, maybe during a lunch break at a job you already know you don't want forever, a thought enters your head that changes everything. What if financially stable people weren't smarter than you? What if they simply learned things your family never had the chance to learn? That thought changes the entire conversation. Suddenly, the problem isn't only income, it's behavior, perspective, habits, time. You start paying attention differently. You notice financially secure people often think differently about spending, about debt, about ownership. You realize some people spend money trying to look wealthy, while others quietly buy assets that may give them more freedom later. And honestly, that realization can feel frustrating at first, because nobody explains this stuff clearly growing up. School teaches formulas most people forget in 6 months, but rarely teaches how interest on a credit card can quietly steal years of your life. Nobody explains lifestyle inflation. Nobody warns you that making more money without changing habits can still leave you stressed every month. Nobody tells you that some people who look wealthy are financially fragile, while some financially secure people look completely ordinary. Think about that for a second. The people building real wealth often look financially boring for a long time. They drive reasonable cars. They avoid constant upgrades. They don't treat every raise like permission to increase every expense. And slowly, that lesson changes you. At first, maybe all you do is finally look at your spending honestly. You notice how much money disappears through convenience, stress, and impulse decisions. You notice how emotionally exhausting it feels to constantly recover from purchases that only made you feel better for a few hours. And for the first time, instead of asking, "How do I look successful?" you start asking, "How do I become stable?" That question changes everything, because stability is quieter than status. Stability looks like having savings for emergencies. Stability looks like not panicking every time your car makes a strange sound. Stability looks like paying bills without checking your bank account 3 times first. And if you didn't grow up with that kind of peace, those moments feel bigger than most people understand. The first time your savings cover a real emergency, something changes inside you. The first time you pay a bill without anxiety sitting in your chest, your nervous system notices. But before those moments happen, there's usually a long stage nobody talks about. The awkward middle, the stage where you're trying to become financially responsible while still carrying old habits and old fears. You want to save money, but part of you also wants to enjoy finally having some. You want to invest, but you're terrified of losing what took so long to earn. You want to think long-term, but years of financial stress trained your brain to focus only on immediate survival. And honestly, this is where many people quit. Not because they're lazy, because uncertainty is exhausting. Building financial stability often feels slow at first. You start budgeting and still feel behind. You start saving, and then an emergency wipes out half of it. You try learning about investing, and suddenly hear words like ETFs, index funds, diversification, and compound growth, like everyone should already understand them. It feels overwhelming. But here's what most people don't realize. Financial confidence usually comes after action, not before it. Most financially knowledgeable people were confused once too. They just stayed in the game long enough to slowly understand it. Maybe you open your first retirement account with $50. Maybe you finally learn what a 401k actually is. Maybe you realize some employers match retirement contributions and understand you ignored free money for years simply because nobody explained it clearly. Maybe someone explains compound growth in plain English for the first time, and suddenly you understand why time matters more than intensity. And when that clicks, your relationship with money starts changing. You stop seeing every dollar as something to spend immediately. Some dollars become workers now. Some dollars are meant to buy future freedom instead of temporary relief. That perspective shift matters. Because unhealthy financial habits often come from reacting emotionally in the present, while financially healthy habits usually protect future options. And no, that doesn't mean becoming obsessed with money or never enjoying life. It means becoming intentional. There's a difference. Intentional spending says, "This genuinely improves my life." Emotional spending says, "I need temporary relief from stress, boredom, insecurity, or comparison." Most people aren't taught to recognize that difference, but once you do, your decisions change. You stop trying to look rich too early. You realize one of the biggest financial traps is spending money to appear successful before becoming financially secure. New car payments, constant upgrades, expensive lifestyles funded by future income that hasn't even been earned yet. Meanwhile, people quietly building wealth are often doing something much less exciting. They're reducing debt, investing consistently, learning patience in a culture addicted to immediacy, because wealth usually grows quietly before it grows visibly. Social media rarely shows that part. Nobody posts the years of staying in the same apartment while investing the difference. Nobody uploads montages of automatic retirement contributions. Nobody brags about resisting lifestyle inflation. But those behaviors matter more than most people realize. Financial stability is usually less about one huge breakthrough and more about repeated small decisions over time. The first major shift happens when you stop seeing saving money as punishment. An emergency fund is not just money sitting in an account. It's reduced panic, it's flexibility, it's breathing room. And if you grew up watching small emergencies become full disasters, that kind of security feels life-changing. Then another shift happens. You stop thinking only about income and start thinking about ownership. That's when investing finally makes sense emotionally, not just intellectually. You realize financially secure people aren't only working for money. They're owning things that may grow over time. Businesses, investments, assets. And suddenly, compound growth stops sounding boring and starts sounding powerful. The first time your investments earn money while you sleep, even if it's a tiny amount, something changes psychologically. Because for the first time, you realize effort and income are not permanently tied together. But this is also where fear appears. Before, you were afraid financial stability would never happen. Now you become afraid it could disappear. You become protective, more cautious, maybe even slightly obsessive. And honestly, that reaction makes sense. When you grow up financially insecure, safety becomes deeply emotional. But over time, hopefully you learn balance. You learn financial health isn't built through panic. It's built through systems, through consistency, through understanding risk, instead of reacting emotionally to every headline or market drop. This is where many people finally understand why long-term investing matters. Markets rise and fall. Fear comes and goes. But patient investing over long periods has historically rewarded consistency more than emotional decision-making. And honestly, one of the strangest parts of improving your finances is realizing some people around you may not understand the changes you're making. Sometimes, friends joke that you've become cheap because you stopped overspending. Sometimes, family members pressure you to maintain old habits. Sometimes, people become uncomfortable when you start thinking differently about money because your growth quietly challenges their assumptions too. That can feel lonely, especially if you're the first person in your family trying to build long-term financial stability. Because you're learning things nobody taught you while trying not to lose yourself in the process. You still love where you came from, but your mindset changes. You start realizing money itself is not good or evil. It's responsibility. Managed poorly, it creates stress. Managed wisely, it creates options. And options change lives. The option to leave a toxic job. The option to handle emergencies calmly. The option to help your children avoid certain financial struggles. The option to retire with dignity instead of fear. But here's something people rarely talk about honestly. Becoming financially stable does not magically erase anxiety overnight. Some people think reaching a certain income or savings number will finally make them feel safe forever. Usually, it doesn't work that way. Emotional habits built during years of financial stress often linger long after circumstances improve. Some people still feel guilty spending money even after years of stability. Some still fear losing everything despite having savings. Healing financially is not only about numbers, it's also about learning how to feel safe again. And that takes time. One of the healthiest things you can do financially is stop treating every mistake like proof you're failing. Everyone makes money mistakes. Everyone. Some people buy things they regret. Some ignore debt too long. Some panic during market downturns. Some avoid finances entirely because the topic makes them anxious. Mistakes don't make someone hopeless. Refusing to learn does. Most financially stable people are not perfect with money. They're just more aware, more intentional, more patient. They understand that small habits repeated consistently matter more than dramatic bursts of motivation. They automate savings because discipline eventually gets tired. They avoid unnecessary high-interest debt because they understand interest can either work for you or against you. And most importantly, they stop trying to solve emotional problems with spending. Because many purchases are not really about the item itself. They're about comfort, validation, escape, comparison. Once you understand that, financial decisions become clearer. You stop buying things mainly to impress people who aren't paying your bills anyway. You realize financial peace is often invisible from the outside. Some of the calmest people financially do not look impressive online. They simply built margin into their lives, margin in their savings, margin in their spending, margin in their decisions. And margin changes everything because emergencies stop feeling catastrophic when there's room to breathe. Another major shift happens when you stop asking, "How much money do I need to look successful?" and start asking, "What kind of life am I actually trying to build?" Because those are completely different questions. One creates endless comparison. The other creates direction. Maybe success for you means paying off debt and finally sleeping peacefully. Maybe it means owning a modest home. Maybe it means helping your parents someday. Maybe it simply means no longer feeling trapped every month. All of those goals are valid. The important thing is understanding that progress compounds. Knowledge compounds. Habits compound. Investments compound. Confidence compounds too. The person terrified to check their bank account today may become the person teaching their children about saving and investing 10 years from now. That transformation happens more often than people realize, quietly, slowly, without dramatic announcements. And honestly, that's probably how real change usually looks. Not overnight success, just someone gradually deciding they want a different future, badly enough to learn things nobody around them ever learned. Maybe they finally create a realistic budget. Maybe they begin paying down debt consistently. Maybe they stop financing appearances and start building foundations. None of those choices feel glamorous in the moment. But over time, they change lives. They change stress levels. They change opportunities. They change what children grow up believing is normal. Because real generational change is not usually loud. Sometimes it starts with one person learning enough to stop the cycle of constant financial chaos. One person choosing patience over appearances. One person deciding survival cannot be the only financial strategy forever. And if that person is you, understand something important. You do not need to become perfect overnight. Financial growth is not a straight line. There will be setbacks, unexpected expenses, moments of doubt. But every healthy financial habit you build today increases the odds of having more freedom tomorrow. And freedom, real freedom, is rarely about luxury. Usually it's about peace. Peace when emergencies happen. Peace when bills arrive. Peace knowing you are no longer trapped in the exact same patterns that controlled previous generations. Maybe nobody handed you a financial blueprint growing up. Maybe nobody explained investing, retirement, or wealth building clearly. Maybe you spent years believing stability belonged to other people. But if you're learning now, if you're paying attention now, then the story already changed. Because the first person who changes a family's financial future rarely looks extraordinary in the beginning. Usually, they just look tired, uncertain, overwhelmed sometimes, and stubborn enough to keep going anyway.